What's going on? I'm Brandon Grubaugh of Grubaugh Motorsports. I'm the driver of this Rhino Roofing G6, and today we're going to talk to you about one of the most common questions that I get asked when I get talking about racing or I tell somebody that I'm racing. One of the first things they'll ask is, what do you race? And I say a sprint car. They ask, what's a sprint car? Well, here we go. This is a Sprintcar 101 video. We're going to show you what this thing is and go through the parts and pieces and show you how they work. So when you show up to the racetrack, the first thing you notice about a wing sprint car is the wing. So this thing is made to do the opposite of what an airplane does. An airplane causes lift, this causes downforce. You're going to have a nose cone in the front, you're going to see that the top is flat because of rules, and then the bottom's got a belly. So this thing is going to create downforce, it's going to create suction on the bottom, and then air hitting the top is going to help push the car into the track. So one of the things that you're going to notice with this wing is that the two sideboards are not the same. This sideboard is down low, and you're going to see that that sideboard is up high, so they're kind of like this. And the reason why they're like that is to create, it's for the car to catch as much air as it can. We want to make sure there's no gaps coming through here, so all the air that's traveling in this direction is going to hit the wing as well as the car, and then all the air that is traveling this way is going to hit that part of the wing. What that's going to do is when the air hits this, it's going to push the car over. So you got to think, if you don't have a wing on your car, if you've ever seen any kind of racing, you've ever been drifting on a back dirt road and you're going around the corner, when you're going around, the motion is trying to pull you away. So when that motion is trying to pull you away, it's lifting the left side of the car. So this wing's purpose is to help plant the left side of the car to help give you left rear drive and help us wrap around this corner and carry as much speed as possible. But we can't forget about the front wing. It's just as important as the top, because if it gets knocked off the car, knocked down, or bracket breaks, it's going to create a ton of downforce on the rear of the car and none on the front, and it's going to make this thing almost impossible to drive. It's going to be trying to drive down the straightaway like a rocket ship picking the front tires up. And then the last thing with the wings is that this piece right here, you'll see orange at the top and bottom, that's for pops. But this is a wicker build that we can take off and adjust to put different sizes. So if we feel like we need to create a little bit more drag in the car to help plant it to the track a little bit better, we can. Or if we're out there all by ourselves and it's a really fast half mile, something that's hammered down, we can take these things off and really trim the car out to try to gain as much mile per hour as we can. The next thing you're going to know about a sprint car is the unique look of the chassis. This chassis is made out of chromoly and it is TIG welded. Not stick, not MIG, but TIG welded. All the technical reasons why that's going to happen is going to have to be on a Not 101 video. It's not going to come from me. You're going to see down here at the bottom, the suspension of this car is a torsion bar. So this is our torsion bar, our torsion arm that is going to our rear end, and this is the torsion stop. This stop is actually on the other side of the car as well, and the bolt that is on the bottom is how we adjust it, and our adjustments of this is going to be what sets the ride height on our car. What is a torsion bar, you may ask? Well, here you go. This is a 30-inch length of bar, and this particular bar is a 1025, as you can see here. And that is going to be the thickness of the bar here in the center. And then you're going to see that right here, it's a little bit thicker and goes down. Common sizes for bars are going to be anywhere from 950 to 1050, and that is basically going to be the thickness of the internal of this bar, because as this thing works, you're going to have your arm on one side and your stop on another, and you're twisting this. So this thing's acting like a spring, so when you twist this thing, it's going to bind this thing up and create the tension or torsion power that is going to keep your car, keep it acting like a suspension. This is going to act like a spring on our car. It's got spline ends that are going to connect to our torsion arm and our torsion stop. So our torsion stop is going to look just like this. This has got a bolt basically going into it. You're going to see that we're going to have a block underneath the axle as we're doing our setup, and then we're going to get this to an area that we want, and then we're going to fine tune our ride heights and all of our adjustments with this bolt. The next thing that we're going to talk about here is a wheelbase of a sprint car. So this sprint car here is an 88-inch wheelbase. It is going to be 88 inches from the center of this wheel to the center of the front wheel. And you're going to hear a lot of people talk about a sprint car. It's a It's an 8740, it's an 8840, it's an 8841, it's an 8639. Those numbers that they're talking about is going to be numbers built for this car on keeping the wheelbase that's needed. The smaller number of the two is going to be from your motor plate here to the center of your axle. And to change that number, you're going to have to change the pickup point from the back of this car. And when you change the pickup point from the back of the car, it's also going to change where the Jacob's ladder is connecting. And we will talk about that here in a little bit longer. If they don't extend the back of the car to make it like a 41-inch rear of this, so it's say it's an 8740 and we want an 8840, that's going to be changed up here in the front where they extend this a little bit further, and this bar that is right here is actually going to be 1 inch further to create that little bit longer wheelbase. It's going to help push this nose wing out a little bit further to try to get a little bit different front downforce, and it's also going to make the front end a little lazier. It's not going to make it react as fast because it's a little further out in front of you. And the other thing that can change if they go from like a 39 to a 40 or a 41-inch number from the motor plate is going to be like a pinion angle of the rear, and basically make it to where you can transfer weight a lot faster. So you're going to see a lot of like the half-mile cars that are running for high speed. A lot of them are going to transition to like a 41-inch car on a 410, just because they're trying to not have as much bite because the motor has so much power and torque that it's already launching it onto the rear tires as it is. So they just make it a little bit further back, kind of like, I guess it'd be similar to like a drag bike having the tires back behind it for a wheelie bar. It's just gonna try to get the tires a little bit further away from the motor to keep a little bit better stability on those larger tracks and loosen up the car. The next thing that's going to be noticeable about a sprint car is these headers coming out the side. You're going to see this motor is mounted right here in the center, and this is a 360 cubic inch Moss Racing Engines Ford. That 750 horsepower is connected to this chassis, and this weight of this car is going to be around 1,475 pounds. As you see, I've had a couple extra cheeseburgers. I'm about 1560 in here, but even with that, we're 732 horsepower with our motor, and with being a little bit on the heavier side, we're still 2.13 to 1. So our weight to horsepower ratio is 2.13 on the weight to 1 horsepower. And you're not going to get that kind of ratio from weight to horsepower on anything but a motorcycle, a four-wheeler, or anything that's even a lot lighter than this thing is. Next is going to be fuel in here. We don't run standard pump gas like you will in your vehicle or your tractor or your truck with diesel. In here we're going to run methanol. Methanol is a cooler burning flammable fluid, and it is what we use for the power. And this is our fuel cell, and they range anywhere from 25 gallons to 33 gallons. And this is a screw-on cap, and with this you're going to hear that it's actually got a ball bearing that's inside of it, and that is so when I go for a ride and go flipping, it'll close the fuel off from being able to spray out the top of this, because this needs air to go in here, because it's going to suck all the fuel out of here, and if it wasn't able to breathe, it would just try to collapse its bladder on itself. And you say, bladder, what do you mean? Well, this thing here is literally just a plastic shell. It is light. When this thing's empty, I can throw it up just like a baby, and it's got a rubber bladder on the inside of this that is rated to where methanol won't deteriorate it or make it get a hole or a leak or anything like that. And then the next thing you're going to notice about a sprint car is that it's all open wheel, and because the wheels are out in the open, you're going to notice that this tire here is quite a bit smaller than that tire over there. And the reason for that is our suspension isn't built like a late model, if you know anything about those, to where you can skew the rear end to help us go around the corner. The tires are made to help us drive around the corner, and we will change our stagger based on the size of track. So if I'm going to run at a half mile with really sweeping corners, I'm going to be anywhere from 10 to 11 inches of stagger. And then if I'm on a little bull ring, I'm going to be anywhere from 13 to 14 and a half inches of stagger. And that's going to be the difference of the circumference of the tire. So that tire is going to be 14 inches bigger than this tire. Right now, the difference of these two tires is probably somewhere around 11 and a half inches. And that's going to help us set up what we need. The other thing that we can do with the sprint car is we have a live axle on our rear end, and we're going to change spacing of tires. So right now, this tire is way far inside, and you're not allowed to know everything, so I hope you didn't pause. We don't want you seeing any setup secrets. But this tire we always go to the center of the tire for a measurement. And we can actually take this tire and change the spacing on it to either push it out or suck it into the car to change the roll center of this car. We can do the same thing on that side. So generally speaking, if we pull the left rear closer to the chassis, it's going to loosen us up. If we push the left rear away from us, it's going to tighten us up. And it's actually opposite here. If we take this tire and we take it away from the car, it's going to loosen us up. And if we bring the car closer in, it's going to tighten us up. So that is just the most common adjustment that we are going to do at the racetrack is changing stagger and changing spacing on the tire depending on from center to the chassis. And every driver will measure it just a little bit different. And right here is going to show you tires are a little bit closer together. This is a left rear, this is a right rear, and you can really see how much different the sizes are side by side in comparison. Another thing you'll see a bunch of dirt racers doing is they're going to take a brand new tire and they're going to start cutting the crap out of it. So if you come down here a little bit closer to this tire, I'm going to try to give you no shadow, and you're going to see the different size cuts, and then there's also sipes. So a cut is going to be a little bit thicker. It's going to be like this here and this going across the tire, even these diagonal ones. But if you look right behind this one here, you're going to see that there's like slits in this tire. There's two lines right here all the way across, and that's called a sipe. So what we're going to do with cutting and siping a tire is we're trying to find bite, we're trying to build heat, sometimes we're even trying to release heat. So on this outside of the tire, what we're trying to generate is some side bite into the car. So we're making another ring around this tire, and this is going to help give us another edge that when we're sliding across the track for the tire to grab to the surface to try to give us some side bite. As we come to the inside of this tire, you're going to see we got one going across here. This one here is for forward drive. It's going to be trying to grab the track and pull forwards. And then you're going to see these razor blade cuts. These cuts are going to be here to build heat into this tire. So these things are touching each other even though they're cut. So they're basically rubbing against each other. So once you rub your hands together like this, your hands are going to get hot. And as we start taking that tire around the track with them two pieces of metal moving around, it's going to help that tire build heat faster and try to get this tire at an optimum tire temperature to help give us as much bite as we can try to get. But if you're getting to an issue where you're having too much heat, you'll start blistering a tire. And I think you're not going to see, oh yeah, we got some right here. So this tire got too hot in a couple little spots, and it actually created a blister and blistered that tire. So you're trying to find a way to use this tire without abusing it too much. And at this point, the heat tried to release itself. And the most common thing that you can see to prevent blistering is going around the tire. You can either sipe like this, or you can groove around the tire like this with a small blade. I use two a lot, 2 and 3 blades, but very popular for people to use a number 1 blade, which is just real skinny, a little bit bigger than the sipe. And if you go around the tire, it's gonna help you release the heat, right? So when the tire is this way, it's doing this and it's building heat. But when you turn that side this way, as it's going around, it's not quite doing this as much, and it's just helping that heat get out. And here's a prime example of what not doing the right thing will do. Now this tire did come off the car at Alltech, but you're gonna see all through here, pretty much it chunked this thing. So we put a lot of heat onto this tire, and then you're gonna see that what we tried to do for side bite out on the outside actually gave us too much side bite, and it almost ripped this edge off all the way around the tire. So it actually ended up hurting us more than it helped us. It gave us a bunch of side bite, but then it started ripping it all apart because the most pressure of this tire, because of the stagger and the tilt of this car, and because of the wing slamming the car on the left side, the most impactful part of this tire that's on the ground is here. And we tried to get more here, but apparently we did a really good job of the setup, and we got pretty much contact all the way across this tire because we blistered this side too. The next thing that's a major component on a sprint car is shocks. So a torsion bar is going to be transfer of weight, right? It's going to be how much the weight transferred one side or how much it rebounds back to you. But the time bomb of how you can release your weight and how you transfer your weight is going to be your shock. You're going to see around our car, we have 8740 suspension done by Grubaugh. We got FK twin tube shocks. And you're going to see on every single one of our shocks that we have this knob here. And what this knob is going to do is change the rebound of the shock. So the rebound is going to be the shock going out with compression going in. Our compression going in is going to be pretty much the same all the time. We will adjust shocks because that's not a fine-tuned adjustment that we're really going to need to do or want to do. But here we can take this and we can spin this knob, and it's got clicks. Can't really see it, but it's got a little spot there, and that's going to change it. So just like a bolt, lefty loosey, righty tighty. So the further to the right or clockwise that I turn this thing, the stiffer it's going to make this and make that to where it really tries to hold itself down. And the left rear of a sprint car is a spot of the car where we really try to help gain this weight, try to keep this weight down. Just as the wing's trying to react to give you drive here, you're trying to help use the shocks to keep you drive here, because as fast as we're going around the corners, it's trying to pull the weight over. So if we release this, you're going to see we're going to go all the way out, and you're going to see it come up because I've released all the pressure off of that shock from being able to give us some rebound. So there you go. That's a bit, not a lot of rebound, and we can do a whole different topic on just shocks. Or we can tighten this thing up to where I want to be. We'll go all the way tight. I like 5. 5's a number that I've been running a lot this year. And that's going to help keep this thing down. Now we have those same adjustments on the front end. We have the same adjustments here. Up here, we're going to have a pretty, when the track's really fast, we're going to have a little bit of tie down on the front end, but when we get to a track that's got a lot of, is real slick, or we need to transfer weight a lot more, we'll pull that out so that we have hardly any rebound in that shock, and it'll help release the front end to transfer weight to the rear tires to give us drive. We have one adjustment in the cockpit that we're allowed to use for moving things around, and the only thing that we can move around is this guy here. You're going to see this is a hydraulic cylinder. This cylinder is ran off the power steering, and I have a lever right here. I can pull this lever backwards. I can push this lever forwards, and this is going to allow fluid to transfer through this thing to either close it up or extend it back. And really, we're going to try to find a pretty neutral spot for the car to be, but if we go out on the track and we have completely missed the setup, we're going to put this thing in the trunk and try to build as much bite as we can and salvage a night. And just like that, she's naked. She is in maintenance prep. So now we're going to start talking about we're going to go from the cockpit of the car and work ourselves out from everything that is inside of there. First thing we're going to start with is what I sit in, right? So this is a Butler built seat. You're going to see that I have padding on each side of where my helmet's going to be. And you're going to see how thick it is. This is to help keep us in here and help absorb some of the shock from when our head's bouncing around. And then you're going to see these flanges that are sitting here. This is for our shoulders, all right? So if I'm sitting in the car and we get in a wreck and it shifts me over, like my head can move, but when my shoulders get to a certain point, it's going to hit this shoulder guard and help keep my ribs from wrapping over the rib guard and cracking my ribs. And then if you look down here in the seat, you're going to see I got a high pad in the back, and this pad that's in here. This is actually a Butler custom pour. And what we do is we basically put like a garbage bag in here, and we block off all the holes in the seat, and they have a 2-part mix. And then we'll mix that stuff up, and then I need help for this step. I will be ready to sit in the car. Somebody will pour that 2-part mix into the trash bag, and then as it starts filling up, I'll sit down and I'll just sit in there for 15 minutes as it's going, and it'll actually mold itself to me. So when you see this weird, this hump in the lower back, this is formed to me. So when I sit in here, it feels great. And then this bottom piece has got a little bit more cushion that'll sink down. and give me a little bit of, it'll help absorb a little bit of impact or help absorb the conditions of the track if it's rough underneath me by giving a little bit give and take. And then you have our 5-point harness. So these will go over my shoulders. This will come out here. This goes over my waist. And then we have the crotch strap. Crotch strap's going to keep me from moving forwards. So as I buckle into the car, we'll go ahead and move the steering wheel out of the way. As we buckle into the car, we will put this in first. I'll have my arm restraints on too. My arm restraints always go on first. Slide that there, and then this latch will latch in there to hold me in. I can adjust the belt on the top side. I can tighten that up by pulling this latch. And if I pull this up and push forwards, it'll come out. And then on the side, you're gonna see this here. This is a ratchet belt system. And basically, we can put a ratchet right here and tighten this seat up. So we can just tighten it up just like this and get it to where I can barely breathe and I'm ready to go. And then when we're getting ready to go out for the next one, I'll pull that little tab and put all the slack back. So this will tighten me into the car, and with it being a ratchet based system, we can get tighter than just pulling me tight. And with it also being a ratchet based system, it'll lock itself into place to keep them from coming loose during an accident. The next thing we're going to talk about is my personal safety and what I wear on race nights. So we're going to start off with our base layer. Whoa! And just like that, we're in our base layer. So this is all K1 race gear. That's who I choose to protect me. There's a lot of brands. You can choose what you choose. But you can see that I'm covered from head to toe in basically a fire retardant underwear. This is an SFI 3.3 rated No Max that I'm wearing. So I am covered from my toes, legs here, all the way up with a base layer of fire protection when I am inside this race car. And next, we're ready to race. Check us out. So now we got our Simpson racing shoes that are down here. It's got a cover over them to keep my laces covered up, to keep us from getting the laces caught in any of our pedals. You're going to see this and like, what is this? Well, you heard me talk about putting my arm restraints into my seatbelt. So when I get into the car, this will clip into the seatbelt down here, and it keeps my arms from going out and trying to keep them inside the cockpit, just in case we go flipping, which I have done a few times as of late. The next thing you're going to see is this beautiful K1 blue race suit. It's still a little dingy from Alltech. We're not going to wash that win off quite yet. But we got this Rhino Roofing K1 race suit. I'm pretty sure this is a 3.2A-5 certified suit. Same with the gloves. K1 here. And then you have my Simpson Hybrid, which is what I choose to wear. This is my head and neck device. So you're going to see it's connected to my helmet. The seat belts are going to go right over this edge when I'm in here. So this is going to be strapped to my body. And then whenever, we get in a crash or anything, this is going to be pressed onto me. So when I go forwards, it's going to lock into me to keep my head from overextending, to try to save us from getting a little bit of whiplash. So these are the layers that I got to wear. And then I got this beautiful Bell carbon fiber helmet. This one's brand new. We're hoping to have the same luck we had out of the last one. So this is carbon fiber, nice and lightweight, and it's here to keep us safe, because when we're inside this car, we're getting sandblasted with rocks. We might get in an accident, might hit a rough spot on the track and smack our head. So this is everything that I gotta wear whenever I am in the race car. And even though it's cold outside, I'm already starting to sweat a little bit, so let's get out of this stuff. All right, that's better. That thing sure did smell like victory still though, man. That thing smelled good. I can't wait to put it back on here in 2 weeks. So the next thing we're gonna talk about that I have a lot of control over, like we would just wanna go to the cockpit. This is our steering wheel. You were going to see, still got a little bit of dust on it. Sorry, we were on dirt. This is able to come on and off the car. if you look right into here, you're going to see 2 ball bearings. That's where this latches onto this part of the steering wheel here. And there we go. She's latched on and we're ready to go. So that will come through the steering box, down the pitman arm, drag link to the front end. So that steering wheel will get us up here to the front end of the car. And you're going to notice something here. We only got 1 brake. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Next thing you're going to notice on this front end is that we have 1 radius arm on this side. This here is actually a tether. And you have a kingpin tether on the bottom. And you also have torsion arm keepers, I guess. I'm having a brain fart there, but that helps keep that together. And then as you get to the other side, you're going to see that it also ties to the kingpin on this side. So that's going to, if we get in a really bad wreck and the front end starts ripping apart, it's going to try to help keep this stuff to the car and keep it from going into the stands. And then this other tether we have on both sides will also be on this side to help keep the axle in the car. But the other thing that you're going to see is on this side, we have 2 radius arms connecting it to here. So basically, the bottom radius arms, when they connect, are going to give us our squareness of our front end, and we're going to be able to use this top one for the caster of the front end. And then we have the steering link here in the middle, and this is going to allow us to set our toe, because everything that we do on a sprint car is for a reason and tight numbers. I mean, we measure everything by the 0.1 on tire pressure, by a 1/16 when we're doing any kind of stagger, a 1/16 if we're doing toe. I mean, all of our numbers when we're doing something are a number and fine tune. And because of the fine thread on both of these, we can really fine tune us where we want to be. So if you don't know, toe is going to be how your tires are aimed at each other. Toe in is going to make you really darty. Toe out is going to help pull you in the corner. There's a couple other things that you can do, but we typically like to be just a touch toe out. I personally don't like being any more than a 1/4 inch of toe out. A lot of the times we're probably at an 1/8 inch. It's just making sure that we are not aimed towards each other to try to keep us a little stable down the straightaway. For caster, this is a solid front axle here, and it's got welded on kingpin support. So this is a spindle that's sitting out here, and this kingpin is welded in place. We're not going to be able to make an adjustment on here, but this kingpin is going to be hooked to this spindle, and it's going to be how, oh no, losing parts, but it's going to be how the front end is tied together. Well, once this thing is running, we actually have power steering. So you see there's a few lines coming up through here. The power steering runs our wing slider, and how it gets its power is right here. So if you see in here, you're going to see this red and silver pump. The silver part is the power steering pump. It is connected to the back side of the cam. It is mechanically connected to the motor. So as we're sitting here right now, we do not have power steering. But once we actually fire this car off and the motor's running, the cam is spinning, it's got a 3/8 Allen bolt in the back of the cam drilled perfectly center, and our power steering pump will actually lock into it. It's got like an Allen head sticking out the back side of the pump, and it will lock into the pump, into the back side of the motor. So once we're moving, it's moving fluid, and we have power steering when we're racing. Next thing is going to be the fuel system, right? So our fuel's right here, but how do we get it to the motor, and how do we adjust the motor, right? So different kind of weather is going to cause different kind of fueling, and we're going to go over that real quick. So right here is our fuel. And we have our main fuel line coming out of here. We have a filter sitting here. Inside of this fuel tank, there is also a pocket down here in this right-hand corner. There's like a square about this big. It's about this deep. It's got a couple valleys where fuel can go into it, and it's also got a filter down in there. And what that's going to be is, you know, as we're traveling, we're turning left all the time, so all the weight's shifting to the right. That's going to try to make it to where we can get every bit of fuel out of this tank before we start running out. So it's going to travel from the tank. It's got a little pickup valve down here. It runs up to this fitting, comes into here, runs through here. And we just got done talking about the power steering pump, right? So here's our power steering pump, and then I have a bracket that is bolted to it. This is our fuel pump right here. So this is also mechanically driven. Like, we can't start this car when we're right here. This motor has to be rolling and moving for us to be pumping fuel. So it comes through here, and then on the other side of this, I actually have 4 ports that are leaving here. I have one that's coming up to my switch, which is going to allow fuel to go out to the motor. And then the other 3 are going to be how we tune this car. So we're going to show you a couple of things of how we tune this on the other side, depending on the weather. And I'll even grab my setup book, and we will show our fuel chart so that you can kind of compare to it. I'll actually think it would be smart if when I'm pointing it out, I put the fuel chart like right here, and you're going to be able to see our numbers right here so that you can understand what we're talking about, because it's all with air density when we're adjusting this. Again, our car is basically a big circle for the fuel system. It's going to come out of the system, it's going to go into the fuel pump, and it has bypasses that are all sitting right here. And these bypasses will also go back to the fuel pump. So you follow this line back right here, and this is going to be here. With a sprint car, we actually tune our cars with pressure, right? So the more RPMs that we're turning these motors, the faster that pump is spinning. And the faster that pump is spinning, the more fuel this thing is pushing. So we're going to explain the steps on what we're bypassing fuel so that we can keep the motor lean enough to run, but also not make it too lean to where it's going to burn itself up. And then in the front of the motor, if you come up here, you're going to see our fuel lines coming in here. Go ahead and go over the top right through here. So this fuel goes into our barrel valve right there. And then we have another fuel line coming out the bottom of the barrel valve. This is our low speed bypass. And it is right here. And the barrel valve is the way that the fuel goes into the motor, right? So every motor needs 3 things to create power: air, fuel, and spark. We're talking fuel right now. So fuel goes in it, and it's a barrel valve, so it's a cylinder, and it's got a groove on the side. Well, right in the top of that cylinder, it's got a hole that goes into it and then out of it. So when we are off the throttle, right, it's got this little hole that's sticking out of the top, and whenever we hit the throttle, it'll spin to the side and close off. So under idle, our low speed, this bypass will help bypass fuel to keep the motor from getting flooded out when we're idling around the track. All right, so now we're going to get into tuning the motor, right? Tuning the fuel. So we're going to have 3 things that we're tuning fuel on. The first thing that we're going to have is this top one that is here. This is our torque valve. So this is a Kinsler torque valve. What this is going to do, it's basically got like 2 release points. So if fuel is going in this direction, right, it's got a valve here and a valve here. And it's going to release fuel to lean the motor out at a certain pressure. And then once we hit another pressure a little bit higher, it's going to close the back valve. So this back valve stays open. It's got a spring behind it. And this front one stays closed because it's got a spring behind it. So it is built by Kinsler based off of our motor specs to have a certain amount of pressure and pop off the front one to allow fuel to go through. But then once it hits a certain amount of pressure, it's going to close this second one off. And what that's going to allow us to do is, you know, these motors got a lot of power to them, and we got to put a lot of fuel to them. So to get our fueling right on the top end, we're usually a little fat on fuel on the bottom. So we are going to, you know, flood it out. So what this torque valve is going to do, and I've only had it on the car for 1 race, and hey, we're 1 for 1, but it's going to allow fuel to lean itself out at a certain RPM as we're taking off. And then we have what we call is our main bypass. It's the second one. We adjust this one and this one a lot. This top one here, we literally just changed the pill based on it. So Chris Moss at Moss Racing Engines dynos every single motor that we have in our 360s. And with our dyno, he gives us a fuel chart. So we have this computer that will read the air, right? So our fuel is based on the altitude of what we're running. Well, altitude isn't just how high you are off the ground, right? Like we live in Florida, our altitude's pretty low, but it's not really based on that. The altitude in the air is going to be based on temperature, and it's going to be based on humidity. And depending on what those are, it's going to be a lot different. So right now, our motor is based off of dense altitude, right? So that's what our numbers are going to line up to. And right now, it's pretty cold in here. That's why we got this heater burning back up behind us. but it's at negative 630. So on our chart, we would have to be fatter than what our settings are, and this would be about the time that I picked up the phone that Mikey's holding, and I would call Chris and say, hey man, it's cold outside, we are at this type of track, these are the conditions, what do you want us to run? And he's got great customer service. He usually gets right back to us and gives us a response. But other than that, if our numbers are hitting on our chart, we have two things. We have a normal conditions kind of track, and then we have like a big or cold condition. So if the track is big or cold, we're going to use chart number 2, and if it's just a normal track, 3/8 slick during the summer, we're going to use chart 1, and we're going to change this pill to what they want us to do. And then we have our Kinsler high-speed bypass. This is going to adjust our fuel on the high side, so high RPMs. This one, as you see, it's got the cylinder off on the top. This is actually like a spring basically inside of here, and it's got a diaphragm system that is in here. So our fuel comes in here, comes in, goes out, goes back to the tank. This is a diaphragm system, and we will set this pressure to what we want to based on our fuel numbers and how the weather is, to what the pressure is. And then I also have a pill in here so I can adjust the pill. And what is a pill, right? So a pill are these little pieces of brass, and they have holes drilled in them. Remember I told you everything is based off of pressure. So you'll see that this one is smaller and this one is larger. So this is a 56 pill. Pretty sure it's 56 thousandths. Lenny's my really smart guy. He just nodded yes at me. And then this is a 76. So that's 76 thousandths on that hole. So this one will allow more fuel to go through the bypasses, and it'll release more fuel away from the motor. So this pill will lean the motor out, while this pill will fatten it up and feed it more fuel. So as this was my tool for telling altitude, this is going to be my tool for adjusting my high speed. This is a digital gauge that I will hook my high speed up to, I'll plug air up to, and I can take this thing all the way up above 100 pounds, and it will tell me within 1/10 of a pound of where the pressure is before that thing releases fuel through. And then we go back to our barrel valve, right? Whenever I'm adjusting my barrel valve, I will hook the line up to the barrel valve to here, and I will turn the air on. One of the things that you have to do though is you have to plug up the hole where the low speed bypass is, because it'll let air through. You plug up the low speed bypass, you hook this thing up, and you'll get your air. We'll take this thing up to 100 pounds of pressure. And whenever this needle is going to show me my bypass. I dropped something on this a couple years ago, but it still works great. But when this one's at 100, we're typically aiming between 18 and 22 pounds depending on what the motor is and what it fine tunes. I believe I'm at 19 right now. I'll have to look back through our notes. And then you got an old Volkswagen carb tuner, and we will use this in the top of the stacks whenever it's in there to make sure this thing is balanced. And because this is a Moss Racing engine patent injection, you can actually tune every single cylinder on here, where most injections you can only tune, each side. They've got them where you can do 2 and 2 and then 2 and 2, but we can balance this injection to make sure this thing is as crispy as possible when it's idling. All right, and then once we got this thing all tuned right, we fire this thing up and we get it idling, and it sounds just like this. Man, don't that sound good? Man, it gets me pumped. I can't wait. And how do we control all that power? That is right here. You're going to see this throttle pedal. So this is going to be on a rod that comes up to a bell crank, which you can see up here. This rod is connected to the bell crank, and whenever I step on the pedal, it moves that bell crank, goes in here, and it opens the throttle. And when it is like that, it sounds like and that is my favorite sound. I love being wide open in one of these sprint cars. They're called sprint cars. They're not jog cars. They're not walk cars. They're sprint cars. So they're made to haul butt just like that clip right there. So that is how we control the power. Now we're going to go to this motor, right? So what is this? It's all mechanical. Like you've seen the fuel pump, you've seen the power steering pump, and now you have the magneto. This is going to be similar to your distributor, but your distributor has a battery that requires it to help make the start. This is a magneto similar to an airplane that it will create its own spark. So as soon as this thing starts spinning, as soon as this thing starts rolling over, this thing is going to make a spark. We're going to start rolling this thing over. It's going to build its compression, and then we're going to feed this thing fuel, and it is going to fire up. And it fires right on up, because those are the things the motor needs. The other things that are unique to our cars is this is actually a Ford block on here that would come out of a muscle car, a truck. I don't know what exact block this is. If you have any questions about it, I would call Moss Racing Engines. We have a spec aluminum head. It's a Brodix head that we have to run in our series. We can do a lot of things to our heads as long as it is that type of head. And there's actually an ASCS stamp on the intake and the exhaust ports, and we cannot touch those. But you're going to see that you have a stack going into each cylinder. You're going to see that every single cylinder has adjustments. You got your magneto, and then up front you're going to see this red piece in here, right? That red piece in there, that is a dry sump system. So what that's going to do is scavenge all the oil out of our motor to keep anything from bouncing off the parts on the inside of it. So it's going to take a bunch of friction out of the motor, which builds horsepower and creates that. This is your oil tank. Oil filter is not under the back like you would see prior. It's actually everything sucks out of here, runs through the filter, does its deal. We got our radiator connected. We have water ports in the side of the motor. We got the water goes, the pump is underneath here in the bottom. So that is going to be where it pulls the water out of the bottom of the radiator, feeds it into the side of the block, and then we got 4 return ports that send it back to the radiator for it to make it circle and cool it off and keep her going fast. Tied into the motor is going to be our MSD box here. This is actually our tach, so it'll tell me what kind of RPMs I'm running. And these are our gauges over here. So we're going to come over here, Mikey, check this out. They don't say nothing right now. But as soon as we fire these things up, they're going to light up, shine pretty colors. And right now, this one's telling us we do not have oil pressure. It's going to flash at me. If oil pressure is right, it's got LEDs that are going to come around here, and it's going to look normal. As soon as it starts looking like this is, hey, pay attention, we got a problem. This is water temperature over here. This is going to read me by degree, and also it's got a little ring that goes around the outside of it. If it gets over here and it's red and it gets above 220 degrees, I believe, it's going to start flashing at me saying, hey, you're running this thing too hot. So these are the only 2 gauges that we have on the motor: oil pressure and water temperature. And that is your tach. And this is my on-off switch, and this is my on-off for fuel. All right, next we're going to talk about my least favorite feature inside these cars, but it's absolutely necessary when you got a uh-oh moment happening. That is going to be this brake pedal. So this brake works on a swing. So as a throttle, we push straight down. The brake actually swings forwards. It's going to hit the master cylinder that is sitting right here, and it's going to feed our 2 brakes. So we have a left front brake, and the reason why we have a left front brake here is so when it starts slowing this tire down, it's not slowing the other one down, and it's actually going to help us turn. So as I say, it's one of our least favorite pedals. While we're wide open on the throttle, we'll be going through a corner, and if we feel like we're getting too tight, the car's not turning, we can actually start pushing that brake pedal a little bit, and it'll start tightening this up, and it'll actually pull us to the left and help us drive the car better while staying on the throttle. And then you're going to come to the back, and you're going to see this is the only brake we have on the rear end. Well, why do we only have 1 brake on the rear end? That is because this axle that is running through here is a live axle, which means it is continuous from one side to the other. So if you look right through this hole right here, you can see out the other side. All right, so one of the last things that's going to be in here is going to be one of the most important, but the one that shocks people the most, right? So when you see us on the track, you're going to see us get pushed off. You're going to see a 4-wheeler or a side-by-side or a truck push us onto the track while we are not running. And then you're going to see us stop. Somebody's probably going to shake us a little bit, or you're going to give us a thumbs up because we're going to time it right. And we're going to lock this thing into gear. Well, this thing that is between our legs is a torque tube with a drive shaft inside of it, right? Drive shaft inside of it. You know one thing that is missing that is on almost every street car, I would say every street car, is there's no transmission inside of here, right? So this thing is live from the back of the motor. We have a U-joint, goes into a drive shaft. That drive shaft slips into the rear end, and the rear end has an in and out box. So when this motor is turning over, it's actually spinning a drive shaft inside of that torque tube. And Mikey's going to show you how to lock it into gear. So just like that, you push this lever down and it's going to lock this thing into gear on the back side, and we're able to push this thing off and fire it up. So when we pull onto the track, we're going to lock it into gear. We're going to turn our fuel on. Truck's going to start pushing us. When that gauge tells me I got oil pressure, I'm going to push this switch down and she's going to make some noise. We push that lever down. There is a slip gear that is inside of here, like a coupling, and this will move. Go ahead and hit that, Lenny. And that will lock us into gear. Yep, boom, we're in gear. We had to it's got to line them up just perfect because there's I think there's like 30 or 40 splines inside of there. That thing will lock us into gear right here. And then as you can see on the rear end of the car, this is our torsion arm that we talked about earlier. This is our W-link, or what we call a Jacob's ladder. This is going to help control the center. And this is our bird cage. So this is a live axle. So when this thing is spinning, this thing is really spinning. And this is a bearing sitting on top of it. And these are our pickup points that help us set our pinion angle of the rear end. We call it degreeing our bird cages, but for drag racers and most people that don't have this type of setup, it's going to be pinion angle for their car. So we were going to basically set this car up to where this bird cage is sitting at a certain degree, forwards or backwards. I prefer forwards. It's going to set forwards or backwards based off of the car being level, the car sitting at ride height. Right now we're not at ride height. This is how we set the car up. Once it sits on the ground, this will actually raise up and get us closer to ride height and get this bird cage sitting where it should be. But as we set all this stuff up, we got this to be able to adjust it. We also have adjustment in the arm that will get us to be able to put this exactly where we want to be, which we can show you right now. So here's the rear end that is out of the car. So we talked about the back of the motor, right? So this is a U-joint. This is actually bolted to the crank. It is bolted to the crank, and this has wiggle to it. This is one we took out of the car. We didn't quite like how that one was. It wasn't quite as loose as it should be. So we got a brand new one in there. This is bolted to the back of the motor, and this slips over our drive shaft. This is our drive shaft. Right now, we prefer a DMI aluminum drive shaft. This thing is light. This thing is strong. It's hollow with a metal ball in the end. So what that's going to do is we have a swivel ball on the rear of our drive shaft. So we have a little bit of play with this rear end when it's moving around and keeps this thing from binding up. Because the worst thing that can happen to our cars is getting into a bind. Because when the car gets into a bind, it is not going to move around and function as it should, and it takes away all drive in the race car. And then down here, this is the torque tube that goes over this. This will bolt into the rear end, right? This is the torque ball that's on the front of the motor. And then that's protecting it. So you'll see there's very little clearance up here. Very little clearance. That thing will sit perfect. And we want to make sure that our torque ball is free like this when we're in racing conditions. We want to prevent our car from getting bound up because it will take away all of the drive in our car. One of the most popular questions that we get when people ask about how fast these things go, they're like, man, you got 700 and something horsepower, and they think cars are just going to go super fast. And I'm like, well, it depends on the track. It depends on track conditions. And they're like, well, why is that? Well, our cars do not have a transmission. So without having a transmission, we don't have multiple sets of gears. So we have to tune our car for the RPMs that we want to run at a track and put quick change gears in them. Now these are ones that are out of my old race car. These are heavy duty. The ones that are in the rear ends of our cars are a little bit lighter weight or hollower. And they will have different gear ratios per chart, and we will either be, I want to say, when we're at Volusia, we're probably going to be at like a 577, gear ratio, and then when we go up to Hendry County the following weekend, we're going to be pushing 700 on our gear ratio. So we have to gear our car for the RPMs that we want to run at each specific track. And when we go to a new track, we kind of just compare it to a track that we've been to, and we swing for the fence and try to get us close. And then after practice or heat race, you might see us change a gear if we didn't feel like we hit it right. All right, there we go, man. Sprintcar 101. That is our video. Man, thank you for getting here, man. If you have anything that you have a few more questions on, go ahead and comment. If you ain't following us, man, please help us grow, and go ahead and subscribe to the channel, because if you made it to this point of the video, you're really a fan and you're really interested. So just go ahead and hit that subscribe button to keep up with us. We got enough subscribers to monetize, but we don't have enough viewing hours. So we need people like you to follow along with us to help us grow. But as you see, man, this is a team effort. I got two guys here with me tonight that are helping me assemble and disassemble this car and get things staged and ready to give you information. We got Russ that's prepped and getting stuff ready for tomorrow. We got all the sponsors that help us get going. We got Sirocco Electric, Countryside Arabian Farms, Crossroads Interlocking Brick Paving, Rhino Roofing, a Russ Noise company. We're all making this thing go. And then we got our, we got a Maxim Race chassis, Butler built seat. We use Weld racing wheels. We got Smith titanium back here. We got Willwood brakes up there. We got our Weld hubs on the front. Our Moss Racing engines forward. 8740 suspension on the rear end. ATL fuel cell. I mean, it takes a lot of brands to do everything that we need to do. Oh, let's not forget DMI. We got DMI hubs, DMI rear end. None of these are product sponsors for us, but if you want to be a product sponsor, please contact me. It will help get you in that direction to help us out. But I can't thank you guys enough for following along. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And if you're really a fan, go ahead and head over to Dirt Garage Gear and pick yourself up some Grubaugh Motorsports merchandise.